Good afternoon and good morning to our West Coast listeners. I'm honored to be with you today. My name is Juan Thomas, Chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice Section, and I'm so glad today to have as our guest, Attorney Nathan Bruemmer. Attorney Bruemmer is a Florida native. He is the current board member of Equality Florida and also the immediate past president of St. Pete Pride. And we are kicking off Pride Month here in June. Nathan, welcome, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate being here.
Good to see you. Please call me Juan. Tell me, so here we are, June, Pride Month. Why is June Pride Month? And what is the history behind June being designated as Pride Month?
Sure, great question, great place to start. And I guess I should also say happy Pride to everybody out there watching. Pride Month gets its start really from the first formal celebration, which happened a year to the day after the Stonewall Uprising. Many folks are aware of the great work done there, and Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera and others leading that uprising. But a march took place June 28th, 1970. Stonewall was in 1969, the year before, and it marched from Washington Place to Central Park, and that was really the first. And very quickly it spread to many other cities, San Francisco and every point in between, and eventually down here to my area, my neck of the woods in the Tampa Bay area as well. So that's where Pride gets. Now, there are some great celebrations that happened before that, a little less formalized, but from the history lesson, that's where we say it began.
So, as I mentioned in the introduction, you're the immediate past president of St. Pete Pride. Can you talk a bit about what is being planned this year, maybe perhaps in your backyard or in other cities across the country?
Yeah, Pride is celebrated typically in June. There are some other areas that celebrate at different times of the year. Pretty much in Florida, anytime between January to November, there is Pride at least once per month, and I've visited most of them. But we celebrate Pride in June. They're actually a month full of activities, starting with a kickoff reception June 1st, all the way up to the very last event, which will be actually June 28th this year, called Transtastic, which is a celebration for trans folks and their families and their allies. But the biggest thing we're known for is the largest Pride in the Southeast is the parade and the festival that last Friday and Saturday. And typically there are over 300,000 people for those events alone.
Wow.
So we celebrate big, but I've been to Prides with hundreds and Prides with hundreds of thousands, and they all are really beautiful celebrations wherever they are.
I'm so glad to hear about these celebrations because, as you well know, there's been such an attack and assault on the LGBTQ plus community. And as an African American, we're seeing those same attacks in the Black community. Your state seems to be ground zero for these type of issues. Could you talk a bit about what's going on in Florida in terms of the response to these, these don't say gay bills as they were labeled last year? Can you kind of share the work you're doing and work that others are doing in Florida and across the country?
Sure. So we did see last year the first of what then turned into a full slate of hate here in Florida and many other states, a number of anti-LGBTQ, anti-Black, anti-woman, really, we're looking at a very large number. They've all been pretty much signed by the governor and are in place now. Many won't actually take effect, but some already have. Most will take effect July 1. And we're looking at what the implications mean on the ground every day. It's taking, really a team of subject matter experts and many, of course, our attorneys looking at what it means, and the litigation has already begun as well. What it means, though, on the ground as far as celebrating Pride Month, we've seen a real rise, unfortunately, in hate group activity. And we have to balance the celebration of our identities also with the reality that for many, the concerns about protesters showing up and protesters who are known to potentially have violent tendencies mean that folks are stepping up their security, and we're having to talk about it. And so what has been for years a positive celebration is also, frankly, needs to be balanced with the political reality in states like mine. But there's great things happening on the ground, and folks are doing what they need to review what the new laws mean. Not only did Don't Say LGBTQ become law, we also have a very convoluted drag ban, which is being discussed quite a bit. And the analysis on what it really means practically, we'll find out. Some performances have shifted, some of the locations or the details, but so far it looks like we'll see great celebrations that will include performance happening across the state, including here in St. Pete.
Good. That's so good to hear. Could you kind of address, if you don't mind, your thoughts around discussions around travel bans coming to Florida or other states that have these type of restrictions? As you well know, there's a national, maybe even an international conversation being held around organizations and other entities that love to come to Florida for the great weather, the great environment, all the activities that people, all the parks and amusement parks you all have there. Those of us who live up north love coming there in the wintertime, obviously. As a Floridian, what is your response, or what do you say to us who are debating whether or not we should come to Florida and spend our resources and our dollars?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. You may have seen, and many of the folks watching may have seen, some of the travel advisories. Here we saw the organization I sit on the board of Equality Florida, along with the NAACP Florida, LULAC, the Florida Immigration Coalition. They issued a travel advisory a few weeks ago. The NAACP National picked that up this past week, and that's really creating an even broader conversation about what is going on here. And the bigger message with those travel advisories are not only the consequences of the new laws that have passed, but it's the bigger conversation about engaging, right, in our privilege as far as showing up at the polls and being engaged in political discourse and voting ultimately, because these are the decisions that our elected officials make, regardless of which way you vote. And if folks are coming, I think they will want to make an intentional decision to come or not come, and then think about the businesses that you're supporting, because we have some beautiful organizations and associations that work very hard to bring folks down here that are supporting very diverse communities. Right. And they are part of the economic engine that drives this state. Agriculture and tourism are our two biggest industries, frankly, and both are seeing hits because of the reality. But we still have good work to do here. And when you come here, support the folks that are doing the work that you support, I think is really the answer there. There are great resources to provide that. There are great chambers of commerce. The Hispanic community, the Black community, the LGBT community, all have great chambers that are great partners for any organization that would want to come to the state, and they can provide, I think, a lot of resources and clarity.
Well, picking up on that theme, as you well know, as an active member of our section,
yes,
the theme this year under my chair year has been economic justice. Could you connect the economic justice to this broader conversation about LGBTQ plus rights, sexual orientation rights, and gender identity? Could you kind of talk
Sure.
about that from intersectionality?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the easiest way to highlight this is to think about the circumstances in Florida specifically for, say, a Black trans woman. We look at research, and there's a lot of research available. The National Center for Trans Equality has done national surveys for years, recently compiled data that should be published by the end of this year. But their last survey showed us that for transgender folks, transgender Americans, if they're fortunate enough to live in a place that has workplace protections or housing protections, right? If there happens to be a human rights ordinance in their area because we don't have any state laws and we haven't passed the Equality Act yet to be protected in our homes and in our jobs and in our communities. If we have local protection, perhaps they have stable employment. If they have stable employment, then the next reality is their stable housing. And if you happen to have both of those, you happen to have a capable medical provider. And when you go through the statistics, it's very unlikely you have any of those, much less all of those. And do you have a job that even has insurance as a benefit, right? So since we've recently banned trans affirming healthcare for minors and for adults on Medicaid, and we've also passed initiatives that make it harder right now to access any care, we are seeing those who are most marginalized, that are at the intersections of identities, just not having access to really much of anything. And when it comes to, seeking assistance for mental health or substance abuse or healthcare issues, there are additional levels of burden that are unfortunate, and many have, interactions with law enforcement and then need to seek out representation and counsel from folks like us that are active in the association. And that is sometimes the first time they get access to a case manager or referral. But I can tell you in Florida that a lot of those referrals, a lot of the great nonprofits that are doing good work are at capacity. They're doing as much fundraising as they can, but the direct services that are needed for all the issues I just mentioned are many, and they got a lot more complicated given all the LGBTQ and anti-Black and anti-women focused laws that we have in place now.
Nathan, you've laid out the challenges and the struggle beautifully, and I appreciate you going into detail, particularly around the mental health issues you've raised.
Yeah.
One thing that I've learned in these kind of conversations over the last several years, particularly in the context of what happened in 2020 around George Floyd's killing, is that all of us have multiple identities. I'm not just a man. Yeah. I'm not just a Black man, right? And there's an intersectionality that all of us share. Yeah. And all of us are all of who we are all of the time, right? And so I think it's very important when we talk about these issues that we don't separate our sexual orientation from our race, from maybe our faith tradition, yeah, our family context, our geographical context. So I appreciate you highlighting that for our discussion. And so I guess I'm wondering, what should we do about these challenges, yeah, particularly lawyers? What role do you hope or would like to see the ABA play in this conversation? Yeah. Perhaps even specifically our section as the Civil Rights and Social Justice section. What are you hoping we can do, continue to do, or do more of?
Yeah, so a couple things come to light. One, you are so right. Our identities are not in a silo. They are at various intersections, and you've laid out many of them. And when we share stories, when we interact and have the ability to network with so many folks in such a prestigious, large organization like ours, it gives us the opportunity to find where our stories or our challenges and the barriers to the happiness that I think we all seek and deserve, doing all the hard work we're doing, right? We're all trying to live out our version of the American dream. Right. Where are we seeing the same challenges? Because what has really come to light here in Florida, we are seeing a network, a coalition of organizations who have all done great work, but a lot of that work has been done independently, and there is very clearly here an intentional effort to come together in a way that I'm not sure I've seen in my lifetime growing up here in Florida. And I guess what I would encourage the association or folks who are members of other local bar associations or professional organizations to find other folks that are doing similar work and create new networks, right? Going beyond sort of the usual. And I've tried as an attorney to always be involved in other aspects of the work. Sometimes the work's hard and lonely, but it not only is it camaraderie, but it creates new opportunities when there are limited resources to just maximize what we can do and the timeline for which we can do it, right? We can get more done faster with a bigger team. Right. And I think that would be my immediate, sort of charge for us. The other thing, and when I was at mid-year, there was a great presentation panel about bringing about civil discourse again, right? And attorneys that are, across the board on issues as politically, liberal or conservative as you might get, we can disagree on
Right.
lots of things, but the way we do discourse, the way we talk about, the way we are professionals, I think there's a lot of discussion around civil discourse and our professional rules of conduct that should continue to be discussed and encouraged. There's some really troubling circumstances that have happened. Often our electeds are also attorneys, and
Right.
maybe that's a conversation we should also have about how we encourage that professionalism moving forward.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Are there resources that you would suggest lawyers can access or read to gain more information and knowledge about the work you're doing or about these issues, or even to educate themselves about these important issues that we're discussing today?
Yeah, my organization that I work with, Equality Florida, has a lot of great resources, great summaries. I'm always happy to be a resource. Folks can always reach out to me through LinkedIn and other social, platforms. Nationally, there are some great organizations. The National Black Justice Coalition is a great partner. The National LGBTQ Task Force, the National Center for Trans Equality, the Human Rights Campaign, Family Equality. There's a real cohort of national organizations that are doing pretty good work, and a couple of legal organizations too. The Transgender Legal Center or Law Center is out west, and on the east side is the Transgender Legal Education and Defense Fund folks. Some are doing similar work, some are doing impact litigation, others are just doing advocacy and education. Because there is, frankly, as so many anti-LGBTQ laws came into state legislation, I think we saw over 600 total get tracked.
Wow.
What was actually passed, and some state legislative sessions are still wrapping up, or what that final version actually looks like.
Yeah.
It's a lot to digest, and that information is not always making it out as quickly to all the folks that need it. And unfortunately, that is stoking fear. And we've already seen hatred and bigotry and homophobia and transphobia stoked as well, because the political discourse, I don't know, I like the statistics, you might notice this, but the Trevor Project does research as well, and they found a majority of youth, 14 to 24, are really just seeing mental health challenges and distress just because of the way we have discourse. I think the number was upwards of like 96 or 97%.
Wow.
Listening to the news about how we talk about stuff. So,
Right.
when we hear what is the reality, we have to really do the research to find out on the ground, what's the new law, what does it mean, and how do we carry on and support each other? And that's a lot to do, especially if you're a young person.
Right.
Yeah.
You're so right. Again, the importance of mental health and just raising that as a continuing conversation in every aspect of our lives is so critically important. And so often I think public policymakers don't consider that as much as they should sometimes.
I think they should as well.
Yeah.
We do see some folks
Go
talk,
ahead.
but not as many as we should.
Right.
Yeah.
You are doing such important work on behalf of our society. We appreciate all that you're doing, but on a lighter note, what do you do for fun?
Well, I do have fun sometimes. I feel like not as much as I should. I got a lot of lessons in law school about work-life balance, and I'm reminded that great emails I get from the ABA all the time. But believe it or not, sometimes I have like a book study group. Our local bar association just had a great book study. That was fun. And sometimes just finding the time to go out to dinner and not answer or even look at the phone for 2 hours is something. But I live in a beautiful state, and so just walking and feeling the sunshine is always something that's good. Get out of the office, get off the Zoom, get out of the chair and walk.
That's important.
Those
you mentioned
things to do.
Right. You mentioned the book club you're part of. What's the last book you read?
So we read The Color of Law, and we had really wonderful conversations. I recommend it. I got a stack of books I ordered during COVID, a couple dozen, and the work just got busy. So I'm slowly reading through that new library. But that's one I reference a lot, and I recommend folks read if they haven't read it yet.
Yes, very, very important book that we've all referenced, and I've read it, and I appreciate Mr. Richard Rosenstein's contribution.
Yeah.
And then my last question to you is simply this: if you could wake up tomorrow and you could not be a lawyer, what would you be and why?
Oh, I don't know. Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be like a sports star, but then I'd have to think about what sport, and that'd be hard. I have a very non-traditional journey to getting to be a lawyer, and I feel like such a new lawyer in the profession that for me, it's still new and exciting. And so this is the dream, actually. So I, especially at the moment that we're in, to be able to have the education and the support of professionals that have laid the foundation before me. I'm glad to be here at this moment and be able to contribute in whatever way I can. And, I don't know, it's a good thing, but, maybe I have a fancy trophy on the wall too. I don't know.
Well, you're doing great work. You're a fighter, an advocate, and we really appreciate all that you're doing. And thank you for being a leader in our profession and in the ABA and in our section. And thank you for being my guest today on our weekly chair chat. And happy Pride.
Happy Pride.